Fargo, North Dakota, 2009. Home to 49-year-old Philip Gattuso. His older brother Roy described him as a big softie, always polite and friendly, a great listener and a very gentle person. He was a well-respected and well-known dentist running his own practice for the last 7 years. His patients loved him and said his calming demeanor and big smile made a sometimes scary visit much easier. After high school, he had gained his biological sciences degree in Louisiana. Before settling on dentistry, he met and married his first wife, and the couple had 2 sons, Philip Jr. and Joseph. The couple would eventually split, and Philip made the move to Oklahoma City to take some extra courses in the hopes of running his own practice. And it was here that he met a music-loving waitress, Valerie. He asked to take her out on the same day and fell head over heels for her. They shared a love of jazz, cooking and travel, and married in 2001. By 2003, Philip's career was really on the up, and he had finally achieved his dream of taking over a practice. He and Valerie moved into a condo on South University Drive and soon welcomed their daughter, Kennedy. Sometime after Valerie became pregnant, however, she started having heart trouble, and after she gave birth, she was scheduled in for surgery to repair a mitral valve. 2 weeks after this photo was taken, and when Kennedy was just 2 years old, Valerie underwent heart surgery, but it resulted in a serious complication. She had to be medically sedated for 2 months, staying in hospital for a total of 9 months, battling organ failure, blood infections, and mini strokes. Valerie's family and Philip were fighting about where Valerie should receive her treatment. Her family said Oklahoma City was one of the few places with a doctor that specialized in what she needed, and this was also where her parents lived. But Philip, after lengthy research himself, believed he had found a local hospital that would provide the best treatment and give her a better chance of getting a heart transplant. After much conversation, Valerie and Kennedy ended up moving in to live with Jean and Sharon in Oklahoma. Phil had been trying to take as much time off to be with her as he could, but with a mortgage and mounting medical bills along with everything else, he had to carry on working, and Valerie would feel a little safer knowing that there would be people in the house all the time. He was upset about the move and didn't want to be away from Kennedy, but he knew that it would be more comforting for Valerie to have her there. Tragically for everyone, Valerie sadly died. Kennedy came back to live with Philip, and although he was being as strong as he could for his now 3-year-old, friends said he felt like his world had been damaged beyond the point of repair. He said he felt like he had been grieving her loss for a long time already, as he knew deep down she would never fully recover and things could never be the same. But no one could believe she was gone. As heartbroken as he was, he never let Kennedy see his pain. He grieved privately and cried alone, keeping everything as normal as possible for her. It was business as usual, coloring and games before breakfast, work at the practice, and dinner and movies for when Kennedy came home. October 26, 2009 at 8:30 a.m. Philip dropped Kennedy off at her daycare and headed back home for a 10:30 a.m. conference call. Now it was just him and his daughter, and with no family nearby, he had started putting things in place to scale back his working hours, and he had scheduled this call to start handing things over almost 12 hours later, just after 7 p.m. A good friend of Valerie and Philip's, Julie Willett, got an unexpected phone call from Kennedy's daycare. When Valerie passed away, Julie and her husband really stepped up to help Philip, and she was one of the few people listed as an emergency contact for Kennedy. The daycare said that Kennedy was still waiting for her dad. Philip had not turned up to get her, and they hadn't been able to contact him all afternoon. This had never happened before, and Julie knew something had to be wrong. Worrying he'd fallen at the house and hurt himself, she started phoning around to try and get someone to pick Kennedy up as she and one of Philip's neighbors went to his condo. All the doors and windows were locked, so the neighbor climbed the fence to try and get in through the back door of the garage. Peering inside, he noticed Philip's Porsche was missing. They managed to get the garage door open and get inside. The condo was a total mess. Drawers were open, photo frames and paintings had been knocked off the wall. There was smashed glass and furniture was overturned. It had been totally ransacked, and there was no sign of Philip. It was silent when they called out. It seemed whoever had done this was long gone. Tentatively went towards the master bedroom, and it was here that she found her friend. Philip was lying on the floor, his head surrounded by blood. Julie described it as an out-of-body experience and said she watched herself calling 911 and she can't remember what she did. Soon the police, ambulances, and local media are outside. Kennedy stayed with Julie that night, and she didn't understand what was going on. So the Willets decided to try and make it a fun sleepover. Kennedy asked all night when her dad was coming to get her, until finally at 3 a.m. she fell asleep. Police started calling around Philip's family members with the news, but almost everyone lived out of state and wouldn't be able to get into town for a while. They called Jean and Sharon Kirkpatrick to Valerie's parents, and they were terribly upset. The detectives said for this to happen so soon after losing their own daughter, it was a nightmare. Kennedy was now without anyone, and Jean and Sharon got ready for the almost 900-mile trip to bring her back to their house. It seemed that robbery was the motive, and then the burglar or burglars realized Philip was in his bedroom. He had tried to fight them off, and they had killed him before stealing almost everything, including his Porsche. There were missing TVs, laptops, cash, cameras, DVD players. The police said you name it, if it was electronic or worth a decent amount, it was gone. The autopsy showed that Philip had been beaten to death, and the shape of the wounds indicated that the murder weapon was something with a circular impact area, like a hammer. He had been hit on the head at least 10 times, and his skull was so fractured the examiner said it was like broken glass dropped on the floor. Detectives determined that he had never made his conference call, so he must have been killed between about 8:45 and 10:30 a.m. Knowing this made them question things even more. It was clearly not only a violent attack, it felt very personal, and ultimately it was just so risky to do this in broad daylight with everyone coming and going to work and dropping their kids off at school. It was definitely unusual. There were no signs of a forced entry either. No broken windows or damaged locks. So did Philip know his killer? Whoever had done this had been in the house a long time. They were in no rush and took their time clearing everything out. It seemed they knew that they would not be interrupted and that no one else would come home. Jean and Sharon, along with their daughter, Reagan, soon arrived to pick Kennedy up. Sharon called Julie and asked her to bring Kennedy to a restaurant to meet them. Julie reminded them that it was the middle of a murder investigation and perhaps they should all stick around for now, so she invited them over for lunch. It seemed they were processing so much that they didn't ask questions and didn't want any answers. The police said that Kirkpatricks were allowed to take Kennedy back with them and Reagan's family were given temporary custody. But before they left, Valerie's dad Gene spoke to the police. He couldn't think of any enemies that his son-in-law had or that he had issues with anyone. But he did mention that Philip liked to go to the casino. He was a big poker player, and the only thing that kept him wondering was that Philip might have owed someone money. It would surely explain why so much had been stolen too. Officers spoke to some of the regulars at the casino, and a lot of them did know Philip. They were shocked to hear about what had happened to him, but were not aware that he owed anyone any money. He was a good player, they laughed. He rarely lost out. It had seemed a really promising lead, but it didn't look like an occasional game of cards held the answer to what had happened to him. With no witnesses in any of the neighboring condos, detectives were hoping that there might be something on a few cameras around the area and that they would get a hit on Philip's car's number plate. Philip's house was surrounded by lots of shops and restaurants, and the bowling alley just across from his place did offer up some footage. The owner showed them that at 7:30 a.m. a pickup truck with a trailer at the back had pulled in, driven around to face the road and just parked up. No one got out, and given the fact they didn't open until 11 a.m., it was just a strange time. There were only 3 other cars parked there, but the owner said they were the same each morning. It was just other workers starting their early shift. This truck had really stood out to him, and he couldn't put his finger on why. 16 minutes later, at 7:46 a.m., the truck's lights had flashed and someone got out. They couldn't tell anything about the person, but they were walking in the direction of Philip's condo. Another camera opposite showed someone walking quickly, moving behind buildings as they went, but it was only their legs in frame. At 10:46 a.m., what looked like it could be a light Porsche came driving down the road. Philip was already dead by this time, so whoever was driving that car was definitely his killer. It headed into the parking lot of an apartment building just to the right of the bowling alley. The tow truck then pulled out and drove in the same direction, and at 11:30 a.m. both the truck and the trailer now towing the Porsche drove back in the opposite direction. A resident in the apartment building told investigators that at about 11 a.m. that morning, she had looked out of her window to see a dark pickup truck and a silver Porsche attached to the trailer on the back. She sheepishly said she was quite a nosy neighbor and she just had to know what was going on, and thank God she did. The police thought, because this was their first proper lead, this was a very nice car and the whole scene just looked weird to her. She decided to grab some bags and throw them into the main bins, making an excuse to walk past and snoop. She said the person attaching the car was a middle-aged white male with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap pulled over his face. "Nice car," she commented. "Oh, it's not mine. I'm just moving it for a guy who bought it on eBay," he replied without turning around. She stayed for a moment longer, but it was clear that the man was in no mood to talk. They enhanced the footage, and using her description, the police appealed to the public and were surprised at just how many tips they had got. One man at a rest stop about 20 minutes away said he recognized the man and the truck instantly. He had been stood by his car and watched as the man in the truck pulled up, but the car on the trailer was covered over. He tried to make some small talk about where he was driving to and the likes, but the man seemed more focused on making sure the car underneath was completely shielded from view. The man, also being a bit nosy, pulled up the tarp to have a peek. He complimented him on the car. A lovely silver Porsche. The man mumbled something about eBay and then started heading inside with a plastic bag. The other driver noticed a red stain on his trousers, but at the time thought nothing of it. The cameras inside the rest stop were very good quality, and this confirmed everything he had said almost to the minute. The driver of the pickup truck, and now their prime suspect, walked into the service area to use the toilets, still carrying a black plastic bag. At one point he looked right in the direction of the camera, and this was the first time they saw his face. About 5 minutes later the man walked back out, in new jeans and a new t-shirt. The cameras on the outside of the rest stop showed the truck and the Porsche driving away. And this was the first time they could just about make out a license plate. Enhancements showed that it was an Oklahoma license plate and that the truck had been rented. Finally, on October 31st, just 5 days after Philip was killed, the police announced they had made an arrest. The truck had been linked to a Michael Knack vendor. He had a long history with the law, including accusations of rape, kidnapping, home invasions, and armed robbery. He had pleaded guilty to 1 count of kidnapping and 9 counts of robbery with a firearm in an exchange for a 20-year sentence. He was released on October 24, 2002, having served 8 years of that 20-year sentence. Michael now worked as a handyman just doing odd jobs around town. The name meant nothing to Philip's family or friends, and there was no connection that anyone could find between Michael and Philip. They lived almost 900 miles apart. Near Michael's home in Oklahoma, officers located a storage unit that he had recently rented. Inside was the stolen Porsche, and inside that was a hammer with Philip's blood and hair on it, and most of the stolen items from the house. Michael sat in custody saying absolutely nothing. However, after talking to his mother, she revealed the connection. Michael was the handyman of none other than Gene Kirkpatrick, Valerie's father and Philip's father-in-law. Everything was pointing towards a murder-for-hire plot. On November 2nd, the police brought Gene in for an interview. People said Gene had placed blame on Philip for the loss of his daughter and thought once he was out of the picture, they could get full custody of Gene. Didn't want Kennedy being raised by Philip. Friends and family could not believe what they were hearing. He did everything he could for his family, and the devastation he felt when Valerie fell ill and eventually passed away had consumed him. In the interview, Gene said he had vented about Philip and admitted he had made comments to Michael about wanting him dead, but he described it as locker room talk, something that Michael had taken seriously without him realizing it. He didn't think his handyman would actually do anything he said, but later he started to backtrack and admitted to police what they already knew had happened. I guess I gave him the green light. Everything was his suggestion, but I was right there with him. He said he felt awful for considering it, thinking that Kennedy would see him as a monster. She's gonna say my grandfather killed my daddy, he said. At the end of the interview he asked, am I going to jail right away? It scares me, the consequences. Police found that Gene had paid Michael $3,000 in cash to kill Philip, with proof that he had handed this over in a McDonald's parking lot. Gene also promised $10,000 more and whatever he wanted to steal from Philip's house. Gene sent him a video of Philip's condo and Porsche. Despite how everyone else had described Philip, Reagan said she believed him to be a cold person and a narcissist, saying he couldn't relate to people's feelings. No one in Philip's life recognized what the Kirkpatricks were saying. It just made no sense. Roy said his brother's death was the result of selfishness, revenge, and complete obsession after Valerie had died. Roy said that Gene had made repeated comments pressuring Philip to promise that if Valerie passed away, he would let them have full custody of Kennedy. Philip refused every time and told his brother that his relationship with the Kirkpatricks had started to deteriorate rapidly. In one conversation with Roy, Philip said he was starting to worry about his own safety after so many threats from Gene Kirkpatrick was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and Michael Knackvinder was charged with first-degree murder alongside burglary charges. One of Gene's old friends said that he was a first-class person who would do anything for you. He called the allegations against him 100% out of character. I have never had anything shock me as much as that did, he said. Michael pleaded not guilty to all the charges as did Gene, but Gene managed to get a $1 million loan from a friend and bail himself out while awaiting trial. On November 4th, Philip's funeral was held. Kennedy was not allowed to go, but Philip's first wife Karen and her mother Catherine attended. They had both stayed close to Philip and they, along with Philip and Karen's sons and many more from the community, came together to say goodbye. After a custody battle, a judge ordered Reagan to give up temporary custody of Kennedy so that she could live with Roy, Philip's brother. Roy said he was overwhelmed with joy to have Kennedy in their family home. Just over a year after that fateful October day, Michael Nachvinder took to the stand in his own defense. He was denying murder, claiming that he had been framed by Jean and was under the impression that he was only picking up a car that Jean had purchased on eBay. And Jean testified that when they were talking about killing Philip, it was in jest. So anything Michael took from that was out of context, and if he'd killed him, it had only been out of his own volition. More than 30 people testified and 300 pieces of evidence were shown to the court. Michael Nachvinder was finally found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In July 2011, a jury also found Jean Kirkpatrick guilty, and he too was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Despite all the letters sent to the judge about how people have got it all wrong about Jean, the judge said he saw through it. Your friends and family do not know the dark side of you. The dark side that the jury saw. The dark side that conspired with Mr. Nachvinder to send him some 900 miles away to this community of Fargo to bludgeon Mr. Gattuso to death. All for your misguided ends. Kennedy was later awarded almost $10 million in damages in a wrongful death lawsuit filed by her family against Jean. And there is now a permanent restraining order that keeps the Kirkpatricks from having any contact with Kennedy. Reagan said she would never try to enter Kennedy's life, but hopes that someday after Kennedy turns 18 she might look them all up. We'd love to know that she's doing well, and that she's happy and has had a good life, she said. She visits her father in prison a few times a year and still believes he's innocent. He does not have what it takes to take someone's life, she said. In 2016, more than 6 years later, a judge ordered that Philip's $3.7 million estate would be divided equally between his sons Joseph and Philip Jr. and Kennedy. Kennedy went to live with Philip's niece in the New Orleans area, and Julie is still close to Philip's family and sees Kennedy every few years as well. She's doing very well. She's turning into a beautiful young lady, Julie said. It was a crime that shocked everyone in the area, and 3-year-old Kennedy lost both her parents in the space of a year. Friends said that Philip, devastated by the loss of his wife, was more focused than ever on being the best dad he could be. But this was snatched away from him and his 3 children. And for what? It was such a senseless murder that ruined so many lives. And it is a case that will always leave more questions than answers. Donald Oakey and Vicki Felton were both members of the United States Army. The couple met while serving in California in 1977. On August 21, 1979, Vicki gave birth to their first daughter, Lee Marine Oakey, on a military base in Honolulu, Hawaii. Just 2 years later, Vicki and Donald got divorced. Donald relocated to Germany, but remained in contact with Lee, who sometimes visited him in Germany. Vicki settled in Tupelo, Mississippi with Lee and a new man, Julian Barney Yarbrough Jr. Vicki and Julian got married too, but separated in early 1992. On the morning of August 27, 1992, Lee, then age 13, was left at her home at 105 Honey Locust Drive when Vicki departed for her job at approximately 8 a.m. This was the very first time Lee was left at home by herself. Lee was going to be picked up later in the day by her grandmother, and go to a school open house and then to Taco Bell for dinner. Shortly after arriving in her office, Vicki was notified that a storm related to Hurricane Andrew was headed for their town. She had retrieved a radio out of her boss's office so she could listen to the news for the weather. She called the house to let Lee know about the storm. Vicki knew that Lee was very afraid of thunderstorms. Lee failed to answer the phone, so Vicki became worried and went back home. According to Vicki, when she returned home, she found the garage door open and the light on. Entering the house, she noticed blood smeared on the side of the wall. When she went through all of the rooms and could not find any sign of Lee, she called 911. Law enforcement found additional pools of blood in Lee's upstairs bedroom, as well as significant portions smeared in the hallway, bathroom, and on her bedroom door. From the evidence found, it appeared to investigators that the perpetrator attempted to clean the scene. The only items missing from the house were Lee's shoes, reading glasses, some of her underclothes, and a sleeping bag. Investigators launched organized searches, mainly through the wooded areas surrounding the house. Donald went to Tupelo to start searching for his daughter as well. He was quoted as saying, "It felt like someone punched me in the stomach. Initially, I thought that she may have run away, so I did not go to Mississippi right away." Donald was told by several locals that they believed Vicki was responsible. There was also rumors going around that Lee's stepfather Barney Yarbrough was abusive towards Lee. Yarbrough was however ruled out by law enforcement after providing a substantiated alibi and passing a polygraph examination. 8 days after Lee went missing on September 4, 1992, a worker at McDonald's in Boonville, Mississippi told law enforcement that they had seen a girl resembling Lee in a car in the restaurant drive-thru. Boonville is a little over 30 miles from Tupelo, where Lee is from. Investigators followed up on the lead but determined that the little girl the worker saw was not Lee. Then, 5 days after that, on September 9th, a package containing Lee's glasses was mailed to their residence. It was addressed to Barney Yarbrough. The package was postmarked from Boonville, Mississippi. The FBI then became involved after the latest development. They performed DNA testing on the stamps that were adhered to the envelope in which the glasses were mailed. The FBI determined that the person who sent the glasses used water and not saliva on the stamp. Investigators felt that the glasses were mailed as a distraction. Tupelo Police Chief Bartigari said, "There was no ransom letter or anything like that came with those glasses. It was just those glasses. You would think if it was an actual kidnapping, you would have expected a little more to come along with that." On November 9, 1993, it was reported in the media that a Monroe County coroner had positively confirmed that a human skull found in a soybean field was that of Lee. Several days later, this statement was retracted, however. It was then stated that the medical examiner would perform further forensic testing on the skull that was found. It was subsequently determined that the skull belonged to 27-year-old Pollyanna Sue Keith. Pollyanna went missing in March of 1993. Investigators were running out of leads as they couldn't find Lee. They decided that Lee's mother, Vicky, should take a polygraph test. She was administered 3 separate examinations, 1 with the local law enforcement and 2 with the FBI. It was determined that Vicky showed deception on all of them. Vicky disputes that she had any involvement in her daughter's disappearance. Responding to 3 failed polygraph tests, she said, "I couldn't tell you why. They measure changes in your body, and when your daughter has gone missing and they strap you up to those things, I can't imagine anyone's body not reacting." She has openly stated that she believes a man named Oscar McKinley Kearns was responsible for Lee disappearing. 9 months after Lee disappeared, Kearns kidnapped a 15-year-old girl he had met through a Tupelo church. For this crime, he was sentenced to over 8 years of incarceration, but served only half of this sentence for some dumb reason. After being released, Kearns then kidnapped a couple and assaulted the woman. He was convicted for this crime in 1999. Investigators have found no concrete evidence linking Kearns to the disappearance of Lee. Lee's disappearance has been covered by Nance Grace and was also featured on The Geraldo Rivera Show. In 2017, the disappearance was the subject of a 6-episode podcast called The Search for Lee Oki. The case was also featured on an episode of True Crime's podcast, Crime Junkie, and The Trail Went Cold. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created an image showing what Lee might look like if she was still alive today. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact the Tupelo Police Department at 662-841-6491. Loretta Jones lived in Price at 468E, 400S, with her 4-year-old daughter, Heidi Jones. There she thrived to make ends meet for herself and her daughter. She was unmarried and young, but she gave her all for Heidi, who recalled most of the beautiful memories they had together. Loretta made most of the clothes Heidi wore as a kid, her dolls, and they lived a happy life together. But soon their happy life would end abruptly. On that warm summer night, kissed her mother goodnight, unknown whether it would be the last time she would see her alive. On the morning of July 31st, 1970, Heidi Jones woke up to see her mother, Loretta, lying lifelessly on the living room floor of their home. Heidi, who was too young to comprehend the whole situation, went out of the house. Outside she saw her neighbor, Sue and Hover, who was digging out worms at her apartment. Hover, on seeing Heidi, beckoned her to come closer to ask her what she was doing. But Heidi replied to her saying, "I can't. I think my mommy is dead." Hearing these words made Hover immediately abandon what she was doing to follow Heidi in to check out the situation. In Loretta's home, Hover found Loretta lying face down, naked from the waist down and her back and hair matted in blood. Hover called the police and the police chief Art Poloni responded to the scene. After the police arrived around 11:40 a.m. on July 31st, 1990, they confirmed Loretta was dead. They found blood everywhere in the living room and Loretta had 17 stab wounds. The investigators didn't see any sign of forced entry, which suggested that she had known her attacker. Loretta also didn't have any defensive wounds, which showed she hadn't tried to defend herself during the attack. The medical examiner also concluded that Loretta was killed with a small, narrow knife, that she had bodily fluid on her, but unfortunately, DNA testing was still in its early stages at the time. There was no CCTV camera to capture how the whole thing went down, but since there was a little girl in the home at the time of the incident, the investigators turned to her to get some answers. Heidi told the investigators that after her mom had put her in bed, she returned to tell her not to come out of her room. She also said she never heard her mother scream or struggle on the night of the murder, but she did mention something that got the investigators concerned. Heidi had told the investigators that Tom did it. The police began to search for answers as they combed the house. Eventually they found Loretta's diary, and in it was a name similar to the name Heidi mentioned, Thomas Eagley. According to the diary, Thomas and Loretta dated for 2 months before her death, and that was the only information they could get on Thomas. There was little to nothing that the investigators could make out of the case except for a name mentioned by a 4-year-old Heidi, who was asleep at the time of the murder. But soon the police had another lead to follow. Around 9:30 p.m., Goloferno, a 10-year-old girl who lived 3 blocks away from Loretta's house, was outside her house riding her bike with her brother. On seeing that it was already getting dark, Kulo's brother left his bike and went inside the house, while Kulo was alone outside. She soon decided to go in as well, leaving her bike outside. As she walked to the main door, a man attacked her from behind, gripping her and covering her mouth with his palm. Luckily, Kulo was able to get her mouth out of the kidnapper's grip, and she let out a deafening scream. The man got scared and left Kulo to take to his heels. Kulo was able to see her attacker and also the direction he went. She told the police he ran in the direction of Loretta's house. Later at the police station, Thomas Igley's picture was included in the lineup, as he was already a suspect in a murder case on the same night. Kulo pointed out Thomas as the person who tried to kidnap her, and so Thomas was brought in for questioning. The investigators believed that the case of Kulo and Loretta were related. They questioned Thomas on August 1st, 1970, based on the 2 incidences separately, and he denied his involvement in them. Thomas said on the night of the homicide, he hitched a ride with some teenagers and they later dropped him off when they got to Price at a fast food joint where he had hamburgers. He said he then went to a bar called Highway Rendezvous on Springland Road around 11:30 p.m., and after that he went to his home. He said he didn't see Loretta that day. The investigators visited the bar to ask if they truly saw Thomas that night, and the owner of the bar confirmed that she saw him, and that he was a bit skittish, nervous, and had red speckles on his shirt. The investigators asked Thomas about the red speckles mentioned on his shirt, as he told them it must have been paint, as he had been painting all day. Regardless of his statement, the investigators collected the clothing Thomas told them he was wearing that night, and he collected his hair, blood, and fingerprint samples too. With that, investigators believed they had enough probable cause to arrest Thomas. And they did. Thomas was arrested when he lived in a motel in Helper, Utah, with his girlfriend, who was 8 months pregnant. But during the preliminary hearing on November 5, 1970, prosecutors brought in witnesses that provided an alibi for Thomas. The prosecutor said the fiber evidence was similar to the rug that Loretta had in her home. But that was not enough, as Thomas was known to have visited Loretta in her home before the incident. However, because Colofenol could identify Thomas as the man who tried to abduct her, he was charged with attempted kidnapping, and so he spent 90 days in jail. After Thomas's jail time, he was released back into society, and in 1971, Thomas moved to Rockford, Colorado, but still, Loretta's case remained unsolved. For years, Heidi dealt with the trauma of her mother's death. She would talk about the incident to her grandmother, who had immediately taken her in after her mother died. She continuously told her grandmother that she was unsure that Tom killed her mother, and everything Heidi said, her grandma wrote down in a journal. Heidi also told her grandmother that Tom always slapped and hit Loretta and that he was always mean to her. Soon the adults in the house tried to make Heidi forget about the incident and stopped her from talking about it. Although Heidi stopped talking about it, she never forgot about what happened to her mother in 1970. As Heidi grew, she understood that Loretta must have endured the severity of the attack because she wanted to protect her, and because of that, Heidi determined that she owed her mother justice and she would get it for her. Decades passed and Heidi moved on with her life, but never for once forgot about her mother's case. Although Heidi still held her mother in her heart, she didn't really push for the case to be reopened. But one day, Heidi was inspired by a TV show called Unsolved Mysteries. She started a massive letter campaign sending them to FBI, Price City Police Department, and Carbon County Sheriff, but none of them responded. Still, she continued to write one letter after another. In 2009, 43-year-old Heidi made a post on her social media, and one of her former high school friends, David Brewer, reacted to her post. The two reconnected after a long time, and during their conversation, learned that David was working with the Carbon County Sheriff. Heidi thought this was an opportunity for her to get her mother's case reopened. She tracked David and purposely ran into him at a local arts festival so she could talk to him about her mother's cold case. David granted Heidi the audience that she needed, and in the end, after he had listened to her, David was moved by Heidi's story. At the same time, he was surprised that he had never heard of Heidi's story when they were in high school. Heidi narrated how her mother kissed her goodnight and how the door of her room later opened to reveal her mom, telling her never to come out as if she knew something bad was going to happen. She also explained how she believed that Tom had killed her mother. Heidi mentioned that though her memory was murky, she had a faint memory of what looked like Tom on her mother, either forcing her to be intimate with him or stabbing her. But what Heidi didn't hear was her mother's scream. Hearing her story, David decided to help Heidi, and Lorena's case was finally reopened. David Brewer started to work on the case, but the odds were stacked against him. He tried to use the crime files, but they had been lost. All that he had was past media coverage and Heidi's murky memory. David tracked down Thomas, who was living in Rockford, Colorado, for more questioning. When he asked Thomas about what happened on the night July 30th, 1970, Thomas was able to give the details of what he ate and did on that day, but he said he couldn't remember Loretta or her name. At that moment, David was convinced that Thomas may actually be the killer, but since there was no evidence to convict him, David had to leave without arresting Thomas. David Brewer also tracked down Thomas's other-than-girlfriend, Marcia Hidego, to question her. Marcia told David that Thomas came home late the night of the murder, and he immediately took a bath with his clothes on. The next day, Thomas went to the laundromat, and when he returned home, she said Thomas was missing several clothing items. According to Marcia, she asked Thomas about his whereabouts, and he told her that he took hamburgers to a woman and her daughter. Although David could not really make something out of the information, he was more convinced that Thomas murdered Loretta. David had tried every other way, and the only thing he felt was left was exhumation. But he didn't know how Heidi would feel about exhuming her mother's corpse. But surprisingly, after David told Heidi of his thoughts, she said she would even get a shovel to dig the grave herself, if that would get justice for her mother. They proceeded with the exhumation, and their Heidi broke down so many times, but after the body was exhumed, they discovered water had damaged the whole body. So they could not get what they needed. However, they decided to exaggerate the outcome to the public by saying they had found new evidence that provided them with a lead. The news traveled far and wide, and soon David would get a phone call from a woman named Linda. Linda explained that she remembered the information she saw in the news of the exhumation on TV and decided to share it with the investigators. She told David Brewer that Loretta had in the name of the killer with her blood. A surprised David asked her how she knew this, considering that police did not allow anyone into the crime scene. Linda explained that she lived at Heidi's grandmother's house when she was in high school, which was the time of the murder. A day after the incident, Heidi's grandfather asked Linda and one of Heidi's aunts to go to Loretta's house to pack Heidi's belongings. Linda said because of that, police allowed them in, and on getting there, she saw with her own eyes a capital T and an O. This was a huge break in the case, but they needed a photo of the crime scene to prove this. David met with Heidi and explained the new information he got with her. And also expressed his pain about not being able to lay his hands on any photos of the crime scene as all were lost. And right away, Heidi remembered that a photo might be in a box of belongings that her grandmother had kept all those years. They went ahead to search her grandmother's house for the box, and in the box they searched for the photo. All that was inside the box was everything that concerned the case, including the journal where her grandmother wrote all that Heidi had said concerning the case. However, the most striking item was a photo of Heidi standing next to the outline of her mother's body. The picture was a really disturbing one. Anyone would have questioned why they were taking pictures of young Heidi next to her mother's pool of blood. But it turned out this photo would be of great use in the future. In the photo was Heidi and her mother's blood, with the two letters T and O in it. David Brewer began to piece the puzzle together. Reading the journal, he saw that Heidi mentioned how mean Tom was to her mom and the fact that she told everyone that Tom did it. And the most important thing, Loretta was trying to write the name of her killer with her blood as she struggled for her life, and the last thing she could write was an O. But even with this photo, the detectives needed more to capture Thomas Eagley, who was now believed to be Tom in this case. The case came to a halt again until someone decided to be of great help to the investigators. A woman named Lisa Carter called the police department to tell them she was Thomas Eagley's neighbor. She said Thomas came to her after she saw the exhumation video asking if she could watch his dogs as the police could come for him anytime soon. Lisa Carter also believed that Thomas was Loretta's killer, so she offered to help in the case. She asked that the police allow her to wear a recording device to get Thomas's confession. The police agreed and an arrangement was made. Lisa approached Thomas and lied to him that her husband had been training to be a detective in Utah. She told Thomas that he had been a topic of discussion as he was already known as the murderer of Loretta Jones. All these words got to Thomas eagerly, but he didn't confess as he still couldn't trust Lisa. But after 2 days of trying to gain Thomas's trust, on July 26, 2016, he started to talk to Lisa about what happened on the night of July 30, 1970. Thomas said he knocked on the door to Loretta's home and she let him in. He said he was in her house for intimacy, but Loretta turned him down, making him feel so worthless. He said Loretta left him in the living room to get something in the kitchen, and after she came back, he reached for a small knife and stabbed her. After stabbing Loretta, Thomas went ahead to get intimate with her, claiming that it was consensual. A confused Lisa asked how it was consensual after Loretta refused, but Thomas said throughout the time, Loretta never said no to him. She then asked him what happened after, and he told her that after getting intimate with Loretta, he lost it completely, and that was when he slit her throat. According to Lisa, Thomas said all these words without being sorry for all that he did. It appeared he only cared about his own safety. That confession was all the investigators needed to arrest Thomas. Not much is known about Thomas Eagley. According to Loretta's sister, Carolyn Kendall, she only knew that Loretta dated Thomas one time. A blind date. Loretta told Carolyn that she didn't like Thomas, so she didn't want to have anything to do with him. This explains why Loretta refused Thomas's advances that night. 76-year-old Thomas Eagley was a local drifter who had lived in many places before and after he murdered Loretta. He never had a stable home life. He lived with many women and had been married 3 times. He had 5 children, but spent most of his time by himself. In August 2016, Thomas Eagley was charged in the 7th District Court with the legal equivalent of first-degree felony murder, as well as forced intimacy of first-degree felony. Thomas's official charge was criminal homicide murder in the 2nd degree, which was a statutory offense that applied to killing at the time under Utah law. Thomas was arrested without incident in Rocky Ford, Colorado, on a $1 million warrant issued on August 18, 2016. Thomas pleaded guilty to the murder, and his assault case was dropped. He was then sentenced to 10 years to life on November 22, 2016. Thomas never passed a remorseful comment except a written statement read by his attorney, David Allred, which read that he was sorry for what he did. But that didn't seem true after Thomas expressed that he believed he should be let go, since he hadn't committed any crime since he killed Loretta. He said in court that he could not understand why the family of the deceased chose to reopen a case of 46 years ago. It seemed like Thomas wasn't sorry for what he did, even after 46 years. According to Thomas, he didn't know that Heidi was in the room when he killed her mother. Loretta knew this, and it explains why she never struggled or screamed when he was stabbing her. Most likely, Thomas wouldn't have spared Heidi if he knew she was in the room. After he was sentenced, he complained to the judge that he didn't like his jail, which was the state prison in Salt Lake County, as it didn't allow visitors. The judge told him he could file an appeal. Heidi, who held in her pain for over 4 decades, had the opportunity to say all that she had in mind to her mother's killer. She expressed how traumatic the death of her mother was, and also spoke about how she wished Thomas Eagley would rot in jail and never have to see his loved ones again. She also said she'd make sure that he never walks free, even if he was eligible for parole after 10 years. Even though others called it closure, Heidi called it justice, saying nothing could give her the closure and relief she needed. The fact that justice was served meant everything to her. As we come to the end of this heartbreaking story of Loretta Jones' death, we are reminded that time does not heal every wound, especially the wound of the heart. We are also reminded of the evil that resides in the heart of man. Looking back at the clean slate that Thomas Eagley had with the law, we are left with the thought-provoking question, like why he chose to orphan Heidi at such a young age. A quick question before we go. What do you think about how Loretta's case was initially handled? Do you think law enforcement would have done better considering all they had available at the time? Our next case brings us to Viroqua, a small town in Wisconsin, USA, with a population of less than 5,000 residents. It was in this unassuming town that Rian Dawn Blackmore was born on May 5, 1962. Her parents were Frank Edward Blackmore and Donna Reitman. While details about Rian's early life are scarce, her mother portrayed her as a determined young lady who valued laughter and enjoyed fun times with her friends. Rian had a profound love for nature and frequently participated in outdoor activities such as hiking, camping, hunting, and stargazing. At the age of 12, a tragic incident deeply affected Rian when one of her friends lost their life in a drunk driving accident. This prompted her to draft her will, expressing a specific desire to have her ashes scattered in the nearby woods. During her high school years, Rian appeared to have discovered her passion in the Reserve Officer Training Corps program, aimed at preparing young individuals for leadership roles in the U.S. military. Her mother fondly remembered that by her senior year, had ascended to the position of commanding the unit. In 1982, at 20 years old, Rian enlisted in the Army and was stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia, serving as a medic within the 197th Infantry Brigade. Her life seemed to be heading in a positive direction until an unforeseen event occurred. On the evening of April 29, 1982, Rian departed her barracks on a borrowed motorcycle headed towards Columbus, Georgia. This marked the final time anyone saw Rian alive. The day of Rian's disappearance held significance for various reasons. It was the day before her payday and just a few days before her scheduled promotion. Her commander had even intended to recommend her for further training in preparation for her admission to the military academy. However, Rian's failure to return has anticipated raised concerns, prompting an official inquiry into her mysterious vanishing. On May 3, 1982, for days after Rian's disappearance, the friend who loaned her the motorcycle and helmet noticed something unusual. The friend saw two soldiers wearing the helmet on a street leading from the military post to Columbus, Georgia. Concerned, the friend took action and had a police officer stop the soldiers. Both soldiers were questioned by military police at Fort Benning that day and the next day. They were released after claiming to have bought the helmet at a video game room in a high-crime area of Columbus, Georgia. On June 1, 1982, more than a month after Rian went missing, her wallet and sweater were discovered near Caseta, close to the Army post. That same day, Rian was labeled a deserter by the Army. This was seen as an unfortunate coincidence by the Army, raising suspicions about her unexplained absence. In response, the Army offered a reward for information on her whereabouts. Then on June 28, 1982, exactly 2 months after Renee's disappearance, her remains were found near a logging road in Chattahoochee County. Investigators determined she had been murdered, having been hit by a shotgun blast. Following this discovery, an extensive investigation was launched with the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation teaming up to solve the mystery of Rian's death. Despite their efforts, the case eventually went cold, leaving many questions unanswered. In late 2020, nearly 40 years later, Vic Reynolds, the director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, initiated a cold case unit comprising retired bureau investigators. Their primary objective was to re-examine Rian's unresolved case. It didn't take them much time to focus on a suspect and establish a connection between that person and the tragic shooting. This individual was identified as Marcellus McCluster, a 64-year-old. Unfortunately, the authorities did not reveal the specific evidence that led them to McCluster. At the time, McCluster was already serving a life sentence as an inmate, having been convicted of an unrelated murder in Stewart County in 1983. However, despite his existing sentence, he faced new charges in March 2022. These charges included 1 count of malice murder and 4 counts of felony murder related to Rian's case. During a subsequent press conference, Kimberly Schwartz, the assistant district attorney for the Chattahoochee Judicial Circuit, discussed the uncertainty surrounding Rian's unfulfilled life. She emphasized the profound loss, mentioning that they could only speculate about the life Rian could have had, never knowing the love she could have experienced, the relationships she could have formed, or the dreams she could have realized. Kimberly highlighted that all these possibilities were tragically extinguished by a single gunshot from a cheap shotgun in the remote and obscure regions of South Chattahoochee County 4 decades ago. She also pointed out that the malevolence displayed in this case had no expiration date. In a separate statement, Renee's mother expressed her gratitude to the cold case unit for their unwavering pursuit of justice in her daughter's case. She acknowledged that while nothing could ever bring Renee back, she found comfort in the fact that these individuals cared deeply enough to diligently seek the truth. On April 25, 2022, McCluster appeared in the Chattahoochee County Courthouse. During the brief hearing, which lasted less than 10 minutes, McCluster pleaded not guilty. The outcome or fate of McCluster's case remains uncertain and undisclosed at this time. This case takes us to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, New York, to a 10-story apartment block on West 75th Street, just a block away from Central Park. October 25, 2012, a woman named Charlotte was in the building's elevator with two children who also lived there and the children's nanny. I told the little girl, "You know how beautiful you are?" And she gave me the biggest smile I've ever seen and said, "Thank you." Nothing appeared to be off or out of sorts with the nanny or the children. Less than an hour later, at around 5:30, Charlotte was back in the elevator when she heard what she called a primal scream from somewhere in the building. It was pure terror, she said. It was unlike anything I've ever heard before. As she came out of the elevator, she saw a woman standing on the mezzanine, screaming. Other neighbors heard it and came to see what was going on. Marina Krim had taken her 3-year-old daughter Inez, known as Nessie, to a swimming lesson. Her other children, 6-year-old Lucia, known affectionately as Lulu, and 2-year-old Leo, had stayed behind with their nanny, 50-year-old Jocelyn Ortega. Marina had made a plan to meet Jocelyn later that day, but there was no sign of her or the children. Marina grew more and more concerned by their absence. Her text messages were met with no response. "Where are you? Where's Lulu?" she messaged. She headed home with Nessie to see if anything was wrong. Going up to the apartment and opening the door, it was eerily quiet and all of the lights had been turned off. She went back downstairs to talk to the doorman, asking if they'd left already. He said they hadn't. She went back upstairs and into the apartment to search for them. She saw her daughter's bag and her son's stroller in their usual places. Clutching her daughter's hand, she went from room to room. She got to the bathroom and saw a crack of light coming from under the door. Lying in the tub were the bodies of Leo and Lucia. Lucia had been stabbed 30 times and Leo 5 times. She saw Jocelyn and the pair locked eyes. Jocelyn then picked up a large knife and began to stab herself. Rema Starr lived on the same floor as the Crims and heard the commotion. "There was some kind of screaming about you slit her throat," she said. "It was horrible." The doorman Glenn Luddy immediately rang 911 and the screams of anguish could be heard in the background. The police were soon at the apartment building, and when they entered the lobby they found Marina Krim screaming and crying, clutching on Inez. A neighbor described her as inconsolable, hysterical, frantic. The scene that awaited the first responders was beyond anybody's worst nightmare. Blood was all over the floor and walls of the bathroom. 2 bloodied knives were found, one in the hallway and one in the bathroom sink. It was a scene of total carnage. As emergency workers continued to flood into the building, Marina's husband, Kevin, was arriving home from a business trip. He worked as a senior vice president for CNBC Digital and was heading back to John F. Kennedy International Airport. When he arrived, he was met by 2 officers in plain clothes. He listened to a voicemail that Marina had left him, and all he heard was screaming. They then told him what had happened. 37-year-old Kevin Krim and his 36-year-old wife Marina shared 3 children. They were originally from California, but later made the move from San Francisco to New York. Marina had worked as a kindergarten teacher after receiving an undergraduate degree in fine arts and then a master's in education. After becoming a mother, she would leave the profession to spend more time with her children. They then went on to hire a nanny for some extra help, 50-year-old Jocelyn Ortega, who had been with the family for 2 years. Jocelyn was immediately arrested and taken out of the building on a stretcher. She was in critical condition. She was taken to New York Presbyterian Hospital to be treated for her self-inflicted injuries. As news began to spread about what had happened, so many were in a state of absolute shock, and a memorial soon began to form outside the building. Marina and Nessie were escorted from the building by police, covered in a white sheet, to shield them from the photographers. Marina was taken to hospital to receive treatment for trauma. Leo and Lucia were transported to St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital Center, but tragically both would be pronounced dead. This was now a double murder inquiry. What on earth had happened and why? As the children's nanny, Jocelyn, affectionately called Josie by the children, was treated as a member of the family. She was born in Santiago de los Caballeros in the Dominican Republic and later moved to the USA and became a naturalized citizen. She lived in Manhattan with her sister, niece, and son. Jocelyn's sister had connected her with the family. She too was a nanny, and her employer's child went to the same preschool as Lucia. She went up to Marina during a ballet class and asked if she had a nanny. Marina told her she didn't. The Crims had only recently moved to New York, and they were considering hiring someone to help. They asked a reference about Jocelyn, and it all appeared great. It would later be reported that a relative had provided Jocelyn with a false reference, claiming she had been a nanny for a child that didn't exist. Marina kept a blog which detailed the ins and outs of life in the Krim family. Life with the little Krim kids shared what the children got up to and all things family life. It was clear that Jocelyn was very much a part of the family. In February 2012, just a few months before the killings, the Krim family traveled to the Dominican Republic for 9 days and stayed with Jocelyn's sister for a portion. "We spent the past 9 days in the Dominican Republic," Marina wrote on February 18th. "We spent half our time at our nanny Josie's sister's home in Santiago, and the rest at Balcones de Atlantico in Las Terrenas, a condo-style hotel where the real housewives of Dominican Republic and their families hang on weekends. It was wonderful. We met Josie's amazing familia, and the Dominican Republic is a wonderful country." Marina and Kevin were utterly devoted and dedicated parents, and more blog posts revealed just how much they adored their children. On September 30th, Marina posted a photograph of their son after his 2nd birthday. "One of the best parts of my day is after I drop both girls off at school and have 3 precious hours with little Lito, all to myself. Okay, I'm getting near cheesy. I adore this boy so much." Her self-inflicted wound to the neck had missed all major arteries and veins. She was initially sedated and intubated and placed under police watch. 2 days later, she came out of her coma and was unable to speak. She was handcuffed to the bed. Her injuries meant that she had to communicate by mouthing words and pointing to the alphabet. She wrote, "I had to do everything and take care of the kids. I worked as a babysitter only, and she wanted me to do everything. So I wanted 5 hours of cleaning every week." Investigators needed to look further into Jocelyn's life to see if anything could give any clues as to why she had done what she'd done. Several months before, Jocelyn had moved her 17-year-old son from the Dominican Republic out to New York. She reported he wanted to send him to a private school. Her brother agreed to pay the first year, but said she would be responsible for the fees that followed. She had split from her son's father in 2001, and her ex said there were no issues between the two of them. He was shocked by what had happened. A source told the media. He had no idea what demons were raging. Jocelyn's niece referred to the incident as shocking. "She loved those kids. I don't know what would make her do this." She added her aunt seemed a little off and was acting kind of nervous lately. One neighbor had only met the nanny a few days before and described her as very quiet, saying she didn't interact and just stared straight ahead. Some of Jocelyn's neighbors in Hamilton Heights had noticed a change in her. According to them, she appeared to have lost weight, was unhappy, nervous, and agitated. She had recently moved back to Hamilton Heights after losing the apartment she was in the Bronx. She was selling things on the side to try and earn some more money. Jocelyn told investigators that she was having money troubles, and she allegedly appeared enraged after she was asked by the family to do housework in exchange for more money. She said something like, "I'm paid to watch the children not clean up and do housework," a source told the media. The day before the killings, Faustio Cornell, who had known Jocelyn since she was a child, said that she had asked his wife to take her to a psychologist, which she did. As the anesthesia wore off, she was in what was described as a catatonic state, eventually moving her eyes and nodding. The more she understood, the less she wanted to talk, a law enforcement source said. She was then formally charged in her hospital bed with murder. As the story continued to make headlines around the world, many were stunned that a crime could be so brutal and carried out by someone so trusted. The shock was palpable. The sadness we all feel for Kevin, Marina, and their family is without measure. "There are simply no words to convey the magnitude of this tragedy," said Mark Hoffman, the CEO and president of CNBC, where Kevin worked. Both Kevin and Marina's parents and their siblings, who were based on the West Coast, flew out to New York to offer any and all support they could. Kevin's father said they hadn't returned to the apartment. "I don't know if they ever will. I don't know if they could," he said. Kevin said he was doing all he could to be strong for his wife and daughter, with his father saying, "Our son texted our daughters to say, 'I can't talk to mom and dad right now because I'll just fall apart. We're just grieving.' Worst nightmare anyone could ever imagine," said the children's grandmother, Karen Grimm. "We have no clue what set her off." To the 2 charges of first-degree murder and the 2 charges of second-degree murder, Jocelyn pled not guilty by reason of insanity. Prosecutors said she was aware of what she was doing and that she intentionally and savagely slaughtered the 2 in her care. And this was born out of a resentment that she held for Marina. They added that there was no credible evidence to show any mental illness or defect. During her first court appearance, Lawyers said they needed more time to go through 6,000 pages of medical records to determine if she was fit to stand trial. She was held without bail at the prison ward for psychiatric patients at Elmhurst Hospital Center. A memorial for the children was held at Avery Fisher Hall in Manhattan. Following the memorial, the couple issued a statement. "We want to thank you for your extraordinary outpouring of love and kindness. Lulu and Leo were two of our 3 best friends, and we miss them so much. Our daughter Nessie is very strong, and with your support we will be strong for her. Earlier this week we gathered family and friends to celebrate the beautiful lives of Lulu and Leo. It is important to us that they are remembered as the sweet, creative, fun-loving children that they were. We are honoring our children by creating the Lulu and Leo Fund. The fund will support participatory art and science education for young children in schools, museums, and other community institutions. Lulu's art classes provided some of her most joyful and enriching moments. We would like to help other children obtain access to similarly great experiences." In October 2013, in a ray of light for the couple, they welcomed a baby boy, Felix. "The fall is a busy and emotional time of year for us. We have the important anniversary of Leo's birthday and Lulu and Leo's deaths," the family wrote on Facebook. "We also have some wonderful news. Marina is pregnant with a baby boy due in late January. Nessie is excited about her role as new queen bee of the family, and little Felix, who turns 2 this weekend, is thrilled to give up his crib to become roommates with Nessie in a new bunk bed. With each new baby, we feel a special and closer connection to Lulu and Leo, who are a constant presence in their siblings' looks, gestures, and voices." Marina would go on to welcome a baby boy, Linus. Jocelyn Ortega was eventually declared fit to stand trial. The court-ordered psychiatric evaluation determined that she was able to assist in her own defense. Jocelyn Ortega went in front of Judge Gregory Caro. "If you don't get emotional during this trial, then maybe you need to check your pulse," the judge said during jury selection. Jocelyn had rejected a plea deal of 30 years to life for pleading guilty to 2 charges of murder. The previous few years had been pre-trial litigation focusing on her state of mind. New York has a high bar for an insanity defense to be successful, and as a result, it rarely is. Her lawyers were going to have to prove that Jocelyn didn't know what she was doing was wrong, and that she didn't understand the consequences of what it was she was doing. Something the prosecution made clear they did not believe at all. Jocelyn had taken 2 knives from the kitchen before launching her violent attack in the bathroom, Assistant District Attorney Courtney Grove said during the opening statements. She added that she slit their throats to stop them from screaming. She said that Lucille knew what was happening, and the 30 different stab and slash wounds were consistent with her trying to fight back. Their wounds were so severe the first responders initially thought that they may have been decapitated. Leo had so much blood on him, the officer who took him out of the bath said he was worried he might slip out of his hands. She planned these murders and executed them at a time she knew she would not be interrupted, Grove said. When talking about the appointment Jocelyn had made with the psychologist just before the killings, it was revealed that this was the only contact she had had with a mental health professional in 30 years. She had feelings of anxiety and stress and felt like a failure, the district attorney said. That therapist whom Jocelyn had seen testified. Dr. Thomas Caffrey said she had met with him to talk about several issues, including guilt, anxiety, and depression, but she did not come across as wanting to hurt herself or others. He said there was no evidence to suggest that she suffered from hallucinations or delusions. One of the people to testify for the prosecution was Marina. For the jurors to sit and listen to what had happened to the children and to see the awful photographs from the crime scene, one cannot even begin to imagine the impact it must have had. One juror was left shaking after listening to the descriptions of their injuries. Another juror would actually ask to be removed after saying he could no longer be a fair and impartial member of the jury after seeing the photographs from the crime scene. As those photographs were shown, Jocelyn didn't look at them, instead choosing to stare straight ahead. There were points during the trial that her behavior was bizarre, laughing when a retired police officer spoke about his interactions with her after the killings. At other points, she shook her head and rolled her eyes. Jocelyn's defense lawyer said that she had suffered with episodes of psychosis and hallucinations from a young age, and instead of seeking help, she had relied on her faith and prayer. After the murders, she told a psychiatrist that she had felt the devil penetrate her body and that she had heard voices telling her to kill. Mental illness does not announce itself like a bad cough or a limp. Sometimes it sneaks up and nestles in before anyone takes notice, the defense said. The prosecution disagreed and argued that her behavior that day actually suggested someone who was very aware of what they were doing, saying she had left her phone behind and had hung several important documents on the doorknob of her apartment that day. She was putting her affairs in order. Her plan that day was to kill the Krim children and to kill herself, the prosecution said. Her son testified and referred to the killings as an accident. "I'm sorry. Did you just say the accident?" the prosecutor asked. "Unfortunately, 2 children died," her son said. While some had said she appeared to be plagued by demons before the killings, her son said he didn't see that side of her, but did say she appeared to be sad and depressed that day, adding that she had kissed him goodbye and waved him off to school as normal. He said that on the night of the murders, he had received a phone call from his mom's phone and said he heard a man's voice say, "I need help," before hanging up. She had left her phone at home, but it was never recovered. The line was also disconnected shortly after the killings. Although there was no clear motive, the prosecutor argued it could have been a combination of jealousy of Marina, and her money troubles were evident. She couldn't afford her son's private school. She'd lost her apartment and was back living with her sister. But of course the theory of jealousy and money being behind it was exactly that, a theory. You may believe you have not heard a satisfactory answer, because there just isn't a satisfactory answer, the prosecutor said. But not knowing why the defendant slaughtered Lucia and Leo Krim does not mean that she is not responsible for those actions or for those murders. It merely means there is no good answer. Kevin Krim would also testify, and his testimony would leave members of the jury in tears, described saying goodbye to his son and daughter. The trial would go on for 2 months. The public and media interest in it was massive, and everybody held their breath and waited as the jury retired to deliberate. After 2 days, they had reached their verdict. Jocelyn Ortega was found guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of first-degree murder. The impact this case had had on the jury was obvious. After she was found guilty, Kevin wrote on Facebook that he had hugged as many members of the jury as he could, saying that the jurors had been through hell having to sit through that trial. This process has been very challenging for us, but it has also reaffirmed our love of New York, a city that Lulu and Leo love dearly. It was now time for Jocelyn to be sentenced. At the sentencing hearing, Kevin called Jocelyn an evil and utterly dangerous narcissist and a complete failure. When speaking to the judge, he said, "I trust that you do not need this request from Lulu and Leo's dad after all you've heard and seen, but I will make it anyway. In your sentencing decision, please follow the law as you always have by ensuring that the defendant can never leave prison alive. The defendant knows nothing of responsibility or remorse. She should also know nothing of hope." Her lawyer asked the judge for mercy and that she be put in protective custody with access to mental health professionals and doctors. "Understand that my client has taken the lives of 2 precious children. I am praying that you do not take her life away without the prospect of parole." The judge disagreed. Judge Gregory Caro described what she had done as pure evil and praised the jury for rejecting the defense of insanity. "Your planning and forethought regarding your suicide plan on that day was certainly unmistakable. What's unclear, and it's unclear mainly because you claim to have a lack of memory, is why you decided to take the lives of the children." Jocelyn Ortega was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. In order to try and limit the chances of something like this ever happening again, the family announced their support for legislation that would make it a criminal offense for someone to submit an application relating to childcare that included false references and credentials. "We were deceived and betrayed by the defendant's family, who remain wholly unaccountable for their roles in the murders of our children. Every child deserves a caregiver who is honest and responsible, and no one should think they can lie when it comes to the care and safety of our children." Trying to find the right words to bring a case like this to a close is very difficult. The violence and horror that was on display in that apartment in October 2012 is something that many people could not conjure up in their worst nightmares. To take such an unspeakable tragedy and create something as positive and inspiring as the Lulu and Leo Fund is incredible and a true testament to the characters of Marina and Kevin Krim. The dignity, strength, and grace they displayed in the wake of such an unfathomable loss should serve as an inspiration to us all. This case takes us to the town of Stowmarket in Suffolk in the UK. A well-known couple in the area, Stephen and Searle, had been married for 45 years. They lived in a little cul-de-sac in the brick fields, with their 3 sons and many grandchildren frequently popping in and out as well. 64-year-old Stephen and 62-year-old Jessica, and who went by and had met in Glasgow as teenagers. Stephen was about to join the Royal Marines at the time, where he would remain for the next 30 years. They soon married and had their sons, Gary, Christopher, and Stephen Jr., and the family of 5 did a lot of moving around, relocating to wherever Stephen needed them. Stephen Jr. said he and his brothers had a happy childhood, filled with lots of fun and laughter. The moving was never a problem, as long as they were all together. In the 1990s, Stephen left the military and he and their son settled into a home in Stowmarket, where they started running a pub and later a bowling alley. It's safe to say the family was always very busy. Their sons soon married and had children of their own, and Stephen and Ann loved the hustle and bustle of their grandchildren being around. Given their very social businesses, Stephen and Ann quickly became popular in the town and were loved by locals and tourists alike. Stephen Jr. described Ann as the glue and backbone of the family who lived for her children and grandchildren, and their father was their idol and best friend. Between the years of 2013 and 2017, Stephen Sr. started working as a councillor for the UK Independence Party, more commonly known as UKIP, for Stowmarket South on Suffolk County Council. People in the town said he was very hands-on and active in his role, and before long, he was quite a high-profile person in the local political scene. As good as everything had seemed from the outside for Stephen and Ann, behind closed doors can often tell a very different story. By 2017, after Stephen was unsuccessful in the local elections, his and Ann's relationship was at an all-time low. There had been murmurs around town for a while about the couple's issues. The reality was, since the early 90s, the pair had been hiding a lot of volatility and problems. A lot of people. Stephen was extremely controlling, often belittling and putting her down, and before long, the verbal fights became physical altercations, and Ann would often be concealing bruises on her arms and legs. When the family moved to Suffolk, the problems only escalated further, and it reached a point where they were fighting every day. Stephen started threatening her life, telling her he could destroy her if he wanted to. On one occasion, inside the pub they owned, and in front of customers, Stephen fired a shotgun above Ann's head when he thought she wasn't showing him respect. He then tried to throw her down the stairs. The police were called several times, but things never went any further. One thing that only poured more fuel on the fire was that Stephen and Ann were both heavy drinkers and had been for years. The more they drank, the worse the arguments would get. Ann had been to rehab before and was aware that she had a problem. By 2017, she admitted that her drinking was out of control. Her mental and physical health was on a rapid decline and she was miserable. Things got even worse when it came to light that Stephen had had an affair that would last for 3 months. And, who was having suspicions that Stephen was involved with someone else, eventually guessed the pin to his phone, and discovered many exchanges between Stephen and a contact called SBG, his code for Steve's beautiful girl. She was devastated, but had no clue who it was and begged Stephen to tell her everything. After denying it for weeks, the truth finally came out. It turned out that Stephen had been having an affair with his own son's wife and mother of his grandchild, Anastasia. This was a bombshell for the family. Everyone was horrified. When Anastasia was confronted, she said that Stephen had been chasing her for years, long before she started seeing his son, Gary. At one point, she found out Stephen had a folder on his computer full of photos of her. Somewhere he had photoshopped her into graphic and explicit scenes. He then started sending her photographs of himself from decades ago, when he was a bodybuilder, telling her he was lonely and hadn't had sex in years. Anastasia said after months of his persistence, and being fearful of what he might do if she continued to say no, she and Stephen started a sexual relationship. Stephen Jr. said when it all came out, it was a very dark day for the whole family. The betrayal had so many levels to it. He said his mother was completely broken and mortified. Anastasia said she was in a vulnerable place at the time, maintaining she felt ashamed and guilty, and was sorry that any of it had happened. Gary stopped talking to his father after this, and he and Anastasia said they had started working hard to repair their marriage. Gary said it brought them closer and they remained committed to each other. After news of the affair came out, on top of the endless fights and emotional and physical abuse for so many years, Ann was in a very dark place, but told people that she was worried she was too old to start again. Having been with Stephen for 45 years, the thought of moving on was too overwhelming for her, and she said that she would push through and make it work no matter what. As Christmas 2017 was approaching, it seemed that Ann had turned over a new leaf. By December she had given up smoking, was working on controlling her drinking again, and had lost a lot of weight. She told colleagues that she was feeling positive about her future, and was keen to put the past behind her. Despite all of this, sadly, Christmas Day for the family was a less than happy occasion, with the tension already palpable. Everything was turning into a fight. Was disappointed that Stephen hadn't bothered to get her anything nice to unwrap, and was left tearful and embarrassed when Stephen threw the Christmas dinner she had made in the bin. That night, with her moods at an all-time low, Ann posted a troubling and sad status to Facebook. Happy Christmas to you all. Hope you are doing well. Have a good day. I hope I will still be here in 2018. We will see, she said. 5 days later, everything would change. 10:20 p.m., December 30th, 2017. Police received a disturbingly calm call from none other than Stephen Searle. As can be heard from the 999 call, police had arrived at the house in less than 2 minutes. As he let them inside, Stephen said, "Sorry, I've been a very naughty boy. Everyone has their breaking point." Paramedics tried to revive and for half an hour, but she was pronounced dead at 10:58 p.m. Several hours later, at 4 a.m., Stephen Jr. was woken up by officers, banging on his door. He was expecting them to tell him that someone in his family had been in a car accident or had suddenly fallen ill and was in hospital. When they told him the awful truth that his mother was gone and his father was responsible, he said the wind was knocked out of him and he went totally numb. Stephen Searle was remanded in custody, and on the 2nd of January, he appeared at South East Suffolk Magistrates Court. He spoke only to confirm his personal details and made no indication of a plea. A post-mortem examination revealed that and had died from a sustained compression to the neck. According to experts, Stephen had put and into a chokehold for a long period of time. A forensic pathologist said that and would have lost consciousness after about 15 seconds, and causing her death required further sustained pressure for a period of several minutes. Stephen told the police that he had been acting in self-defense. He said an argument had been sparked after the affair with Anastasia was brought up again, and had attacked him with a steak knife, and he struggled to fight her off. He said he was using one hand to try and disarm her, and the other to restrain her, maintaining he had accidentally killed her in the process, something police said they didn't believe at all. The investigators said Stephen was a self-centered narcissist, caring for little else apart from himself. Detective Chief Superintendent Eamon Bridger said his team listened to the 999 call many times, and everything they thought about Stephen as a person was reflected very clearly in those 2 minutes. He spoke calmly, as if he was ordering some food, with no remorse or sadness, no angst or upset. This was amplified further when it turned out that Anne had actually died an hour before the phone call to police was made, and he hadn't bothered to contact anyone during that time. Stephen said, "Eventually she stopped struggling and I said, 'Thank fuck for that, I'm gonna have a cigarette.' She didn't reply. I was expecting her to kick off again. When she didn't, I thought she had gone to bed and that it would be fine in the morning." He was still maintaining it was self-defense and continued with this argument in court, pleading not guilty for murder and hoping for a manslaughter conviction instead. In July 2018, a 7-day trial got underway. The prosecution were confident that they had enough to convince a jury that this was not self-defense. They argued that Anne would have been unconscious within about 20 seconds, and the way that Stephen had carried on despite the fact she wasn't responding was proof that he was intent on killing her in that moment. They said that he hadn't tried to revive his wife, he hadn't called an ambulance, and he hadn't even called the police until an hour later, by which point it was too late to do anything, and his cold and collected phone call to police painted a picture of someone that was not panicking, upset or shaken up by what had happened. He simply didn't care. After just a few hours of deliberations, the jury rejected Stephen's self-defense argument, and he was found guilty of murder. He was later sentenced to life with a minimum of 14 years to serve. Stephen sat emotionless as the sentence was read out. Stephen Jr. gave a victim's impact statement and said the Searle family will never heal or recover from what had happened. "I feel emotionally drained most days." The judge said he took into consideration Stephen's age, fact that premeditation could not be proven, and the fact that he had just been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And he said the minimum term of 14 years to serve reflected all of these factors. The judge said in part, "By your own hands, you have brought grief and distress untold upon your family. You have deprived your children of the mother that they loved. You have deprived your grandchildren of their grandmother, and you have deprived and of the remaining years of her life. I think that it must go without saying that your actions have caused devastating waves of pain and anguish to crash through your entire family. No sentence that I impose can ever undo that suffering." Detective Chief Superintendent Eamon Bridger said that their thoughts were with the family and stated, "Domestic abuse continues to take place behind closed doors. Suffolk Constabulary will take positive action against the perpetrators where we have the opportunity. When the victims of abuse come to us, we will work with them to address their needs and make them and their families safe. Our focus is firmly on the needs of victims, and we will continue to work closely with our partners in tackling this type of crime." The aftermath of what happened that December night is still widely felt in the small and close community. Stephen Jr. said he went to bed with both his parents, and in the space of a few hours, they were both gone. The only comfort he takes is that the last time he saw his mother, she was so happy and joyful. The house was filled with laughter and she was in the highest and most positive of spirits. 19-year-old Mia Marcano was born in Pembroke Pines, Florida to parents Marlon and Emma, and she had a little brother, Marlon Jr., who she called Munchie. Her mother and father had separated when she was young, but they all remained close and Mia and Marlon Jr. got on really well with their stepmom Giselle too. Mia was described as ambitious and adventurous, a loyal and protective person, especially when it came to her brother. Her family said she had a great energy that people just gravitated towards. When it came time to finalizing her plans after high school, staying in Florida was a must. She loved her life there and decided on the University of Central Florida, before moving and settling into Valencia College to pursue an associate degree in arts. She later wanted to train in either sports medicine or physiotherapy. The creative arts was always a big love for her, fashion and design as well, and she was a frequent fixture in the local carnivals. Again, the Sunshine State was a great place for all things festivals, fairs, food and fun. The perfect home for Mia. While studying, she was staying at the Arden Villas apartment complex, with the vast majority of people living there being fellow students, and when she managed to get a job at the complex too, helping to lease these apartments, it was a win-win. Something she didn't have to travel for and was easy to do around her studies. She was only an hour's flight away from her family and would often jet back to catch up, never going long without seeing them. On the 24th of September, 2021, was set to grab a flight home for the weekend, but when she didn't send a text to say that she had arrived at the airport or was boarding her flight, alarm bells rang. It was such a natural thing for most people to do, and Mia was always in communication with her family. It was now hours later and long past the time she was due in, but she never got off the plane. When it got to around 9:30 on that Friday night, her family could no longer rationalize her not answering her phone. They reported it to the police and requested that a welfare check be carried out. Deputy Samir Polino went over to Arden Villas, arriving at 10:02 p.m., but no one was there. He noted that nothing on the outside looked out of the ordinary and nothing stood out to him as being wrong. He waited for her roommate and eventually got in. They knocked on Mia's bedroom, but there was still no answer, and when they tried to force the door, it was obvious it was locked from the inside. The deputy then checked through her window and saw a small bookcase against her door. He finally managed to open the window and get in. Her room painted a troubling picture. Everything was a mess, and red stains covered the pillows. Her bedding was everywhere, and her luggage, ready to go with her to the airport, was sat by her desk. Her father Marlon had put his own locks on her windows for extra safety, but these had been broken off. Some of her jewelry was also broken, with no indication at all as to where she was. There was a lot to go over. Despite how concerning the inside of the apartment looked, Deputy Paulino discussed the case with his supervisor, Corporal Dale, but neither of them notified the Criminal Investigations Division. Paulino also left the scene to respond to other calls without informing anyone about the evidence of a potential crime he found inside the apartment. Her roommate was upset and concerned and was quick to give the police a name. Mia had recently been getting some unwanted attention from a maintenance worker in the complex. He had become more and more persistent, and as a result things were very uncomfortable for Mia. This man was 27-year-old Armando Caballero, and he had been working at the apartment complex since June of that year. More people backed what her roommate was saying and said they had seen this happening too. By the sounds of it, Armando was obsessed with the 19-year-old and was constantly finding ways to talk to her and ask her out. She had rejected him so many times and was now bordering on being a bit scared about it all. He even sent her $700 via Cash App for, quote, being pretty. She sent the money straight back but didn't really know what to do anymore other than try and ignore him. Other women at the complex had had their own issues with Armando, and the police were suddenly receiving a lot of the same information about him. Another woman living at the Sobel Club apartments later told investigators that he had written her a note asking her for a date back in March 2021. She wasn't sure but had agreed to go anyway. But when he asked to hang out sooner, she said she couldn't, and he was not happy. After this, a weight was thrown at her window in the middle of the night. She said given the way he had been behaving, she felt sure it was him and called the police. They logged it and made some searches, but eventually the case was dropped and he was not charged. Just a couple of months later, Armando was working at Arden Villas. As Mia's family arrived at around 3 a.m. to help with the search, they pointed out several things to Deputy Paulino that they were worried weren't standing out to him. One of them was a yellow box cutter under the bed and her childhood teddy bear, which her family said she would take with her on every trip no matter how short it might be, was there too. An hour later at 4 a.m., a familiar face arrived in front of Mia's apartment with his roommate, Armando himself. It was now close to 5 a.m. Armando was off work and had no reason to be turning up there. Mia's family had heard enough about him to know exactly who he was. The fact he was there with no need to be was very unsettling for them. Why was he inserting himself into this? Detectives asked him if he knew what was going on, and he replied that he was on the phone with a coworker, Tatiana, who had allegedly informed him that Mia was missing, which was why he was there. Mia's family knew there was more to this, especially given everything that they had heard from Mia, and they wanted answers. He denied all their allegations, however. He told the officers that he hadn't seen her around the complex before she went missing. It was hours beforehand, and he didn't have anything else to offer. Detectives didn't feel they really had any reason to talk to him further, let alone arrest him. And with this, Armando left the complex. A background check showed he was a convicted felon, having been convicted in 2017 of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Back in 2013, he was arrested for using a destructive device resulting in property damage and discharging a weapon on school property. Polk County Sheriff's deputies were called to the campus of Warner University after a report of a bomb going off inside a dorm. The report said that Armando had admitted to using the improvised explosive as a prank on other residents in the dorm. Unfortunately, no one was injured. The security guard that worked on the complex managed to lift fingerprints from Mia's window using tape, but Deputy Paulino did not take them, saying that it wasn't a high-priority case and that he could keep the tape. The same guard had also noticed a screwdriver and cell phone case in the back seat of Armando's car. But with no warrant, they couldn't open it in search. Orange County Sheriff John Mina said, "There is not enough there in that video or happened that night to establish an arrest or that this person has to be detained." A different deputy was soon notified about Mia's case and went to the apartment at the request of her aunt. He was very troubled by what he was seeing and hearing and notified a missing persons detective immediately, and a formal investigation was quickly launched. It was now September 25th, 8:47 a.m. Investigators got a call from Mia's family saying they needed to head to Armando's apartment. Still bothered by him and convinced he knew more, they had started their own covert surveillance and had been watching him from their car. They saw him come outside with a glove, a backpack, and a pink blanket. A blanket they knew they recognized. When police got there, Armando gave Mia's family permission to come into the apartment, with the police watching on, so they could take a look around, but nothing could be touched or moved, and authorities could only watch as they didn't have a proper search warrant. At 3 p.m. hours later, Armando left his apartment, and just an hour and a half after that, police confirmed he was now indeed a suspect in the disappearance of Mia Marcano. Authorities were trying to get hold of a proper search warrant that would finally be approved just over 24 hours after Mia went missing. At 9:35 p.m. that same night, Armando sent a text message. After this, to everyone's surprise, he too would vanish. Was it possible that Mia was being held somewhere against her will and he had gone to meet her or move her? Maybe even go on the run? Police just didn't know. Hundreds of volunteers were now joining in the search, and miles of area were being combed through. But there was still no trace of Mia anywhere. Analysis of Mia's unit showed that at 2:14 p.m., just 3 hours before she was last seen, a master key had buzzed into her unit. But this was not her key. This fob was linked to none other than Armando. More checks showed that he had accessed her apartment again at 4:34 p.m., then buzzed into her unit to grab her bag and dash to the airport. A trip they knew she never made. This appeared to conclude that Armando was in Mia's apartment and waiting for her when she arrived home. And at 5:52 p.m., Armando's vehicle was picked up leaving Arden Villas. The final and eerie image of her walking into her apartment that afternoon was now deeply unsettling given what police now knew she walked into. Her mom said she would scream at the picture, willing her to not go in and wishing that something could have distracted her or made her turn around. On September 27th, police had enough to arrest Armando on suspected burglary charges. They now knew there was more to this, but they just didn't have enough yet to make that charge. But before the arrest could take place, an unexpected call would be made. One that would shock everyone and change the course of everything. 27-year-old Armando Caballero had taken his own life. This was all unraveling very quickly, and with Armando now gone, there was a worry that they would never be able to find Mia or reach any kind of conclusion. The search had to continue, mainly using Armando's phone data, and it was through this that they were able to start getting some answers. At 7:01 p.m., about 2 hours after Mia was last seen, Armando had logged a maintenance call. A call from Mia's unit. a call which was quickly determined to be totally fake, and had not been requested by Mia or her roommates. At 7:11 p.m., just 10 minutes later, Armando contacted the apartment office staff and asked to be let in at the complex gates. And then, 5 minutes later, Mia's own key fob was swiped at her unit, but no one entered. They could not say for sure that this was Armando, but they knew it definitely was not Mia. A short time then passed, and then at 7:40 p.m., Armando left the complex again in his car. More analysis of his phone showed that on the evening Mia went missing, he was near Timberscan, a place he used to live. On that day, he had stayed there for 20 minutes before leaving. There were a lot of abandoned homes and boarded-up buildings in the area, and residents said it always felt really unsafe and scary. If Armando used to live there, why did he need to go back? And for only 20 minutes? Part of his old apartment complex was now totally derelict, and there was a big wooded area surrounding it. The searches had been huge and covered miles and miles, but they now felt they had a place to focus on. They moved their search efforts over there, and the FBI were now involved too. Family and friends were still praying that she was alive somewhere. Although it wasn't looking good, they still had hope and were clinging on to everything they could. Saturday, October 2nd, 2021, after a week of searching, an awful discovery was made about 18 miles from Arden Villas in an abandoned part of Timberscan Apartments. They had found a body. Mia was found bound with black duct tape on her hands and feet, and her mouth was covered with tape too. She was wearing jeans, her bra, and a robe. Her bag was located nearby, and inside it was the shirt she was last seen wearing and her ID. An autopsy would later confirm that she had died by homicide by undetermined means, but due to decomposition they couldn't determine anything else. The report also noted no identifiable evidence of trauma and no evidence of sexual assault. And testing from where Armando's body was found would come back too, and it confirmed the presence of Mia's blood and hair. The same black duct tape that was found around Mia's body was also found in his car. They also determined that 2 marks on his finger were consistent with bite marks, and he had more marks on his body that showed he was involved with a struggle very recently. As quick as everything had happened, it had now suddenly all come to a painful end, but no one had any answers. What happened in her apartment that day will now never ever be known, and any chance of closure has been lost forever. Other residents of her apartment complex were horrified, especially as they had been logging safety concerns for ages. What happened to Mia was everyone's worst nightmare, and they all felt let down in a lot of ways. One resident said was just creepy, and the fact that maintenance people have access to our apartments and we just got these key fobs last month. If these key fobs weren't introduced last month, no one would have went into her apartment. If you really think about it, people who are living in apartment complexes are going to sleep at night not knowing that there is someone who has free access to their apartment. The Marcano's lawyer added. On October 15th, Mia was laid to rest in a funeral, which over 2,000 people would turn up for, and thousands of others were tuned into the live stream of. The aftermath of this case was massive, and a lot of action was taken in various ways. 2 deputies that had worked on the investigation were found to have violated department policies. It was determined that Deputy Samir Paulino did not follow proper procedure when he went to investigate the apartment, and he failed to report certain details to his supervisor, such as the blood being found on the pillow or the jewelry being found broken. Due to these errors, Mia was logged as a voluntary missing person instead of a missing endangered person, and thus the Criminal Investigations Division was not notified by him or his supervisor. Rick Raymond, a former police officer and now private investigator, said he thinks enough red flags should have been set off when it came to Armando turning up that morning. When you have multiple individuals saying that item belongs to a missing individual and it is in this individual's vehicle, to me, that would have told me immediately I need to look at this guy, Rick said. But Sheriff Mina was quick to respond and said, "Remember, that deputy didn't have all the information that we now have a week and a half later. So yes, all that takes time." He did acknowledge that more could have and should have been done, though. In the case of Mia Marcano's disappearance, managers in the responding deputy's chain of command recognized a lack of urgency on his part and asked that his role and the role of his corporal in the first hours of that incident be investigated by a professional standards division. As a result of this incident, we are in the process of making changes to policy that will direct first responding patrol deputies to immediately notify their supervisors and the missing persons unit in any case where someone is considered a missing endangered person. The sheriff's office said that Deputy Paulino received 150-hour unpaid suspension as discipline, and his supervisor, Corporal Kenneth Dale, was also found to have violated department policies. He received a 10-hour unpaid suspension as discipline. In March 2022, the police released their final report into Mia's disappearance and death. It was over 100 pages long and listed everything that they had on Armando Caballero and why he was and still is the only suspect in her case. Mia's family launched a wrongful death lawsuit against the apartment complex and another lawsuit against the Orange County Sheriff's Office, claiming the department handled her case carelessly and failed to treat her room as a crime scene. Arden Villas released a statement in response saying, "To ensure nothing like this happens again at Arden Villas, we are taking numerous proactive steps to enhance our security protocols. We are in the process of reviewing our entire security apparatus and will make changes or upgrades as warranted." They said that Armando was vetted through a national background check services provider and no records of burglary or sexual assault were found on him. But Mia's family said that the apartment complex hadn't even acknowledged she was missing, hadn't reached out to them, and it took them several days to issue any kind of statement about not only someone that lived there, but someone that was their coworker and friend too. The family is hoping that by pursuing this lawsuit, they can get answers to the numerous questions that remain unanswered and real change, said the Marcano's attorney, Daryl Washington. He added that Mia's family believes that other people could have aided Armando in killing Mia, and he also criticized the department's handling of Mia's case. The Marcano family say they have not received any reports or records of the investigation by the sheriff's office, but Sheriff Mina said the investigation is still ongoing. Many residents started protests about Arden Villas and open letters were written to them detailing just how unsafe the complex actually felt and how many issues there had been going back to long before Mia went missing. It highlighted a lack of cameras, a lack of security, bad lighting, and awful maintenance, and places like the parking lot had not a single camera and was very poorly lit. The lawsuit launched by Mia's family against Arden Villas was eventually settled. In honor of what would have been her 20th birthday, the late teen was honored in a special way, with her family getting a key to the city of Pembroke Pines. Her birthday would also be officially named Mia Marcano Day. In June 2022, MIA's law, also known as Senate Bill 898, was signed into law. It states that property owners must conduct a background check of any potential employees. People with a violent criminal history or anyone listed as a sexual offender or sexual predator will not be eligible. And additionally, a log will need to be kept, tracking each unit's set of keys. And if maintenance does need to access a unit, they need to give the tenant a 24-hour notice period, instead of the previously required 12 hours. Her family set up the Mia Marcano Foundation and their mission is to support, educate, and provide resources to families of missing persons while advocating for the protection of students and the most vulnerable. They often help support in searches for other missing people too and offer support to families going through what they did. They also set up the MMF Safe and Secure Accreditation Program. MMF aims to assist with ensuring the department complexes and multi-unit dwellings are as safe as possible and provides professional development for staff. They have made a lot of much-needed changes and are working tirelessly to carry on making those changes. When Mia Marcano booked her flight home to see her family on September 24, 2021, it was nothing but a totally standard and normal visit. What happened so quickly over such a short period of time will forever haunt everyone that knew her. There are still so many questions and no one is around to answer them. Her Aunt Pia said, "Can never take time for granted and life really is too short." Talking about Mia in the past, "I always thought I had forever," she said. Mia's brother said nothing good that happens to him will ever give him pure happiness. No matter how amazing it is, he's reminded that he can't call his sister to tell her, and she can't be there to celebrate with him. Emma, Mia's mom, said, "For everyone else, life goes on, but I'm still here trying to figure this puzzle out. Will I ever finish this puzzle? I don't know. I think about her every day, every hour, every minute. She's everywhere. Her presence is everywhere. Every day I look at her pictures. But eventually that's it. There are no more pictures to be made. There are no more memories. Her pictures are going to fade, just like everything else. She'll be forever 19. The tranquility of a small American town was shattered by a tragic incident. A young girl vanished without a trace from her own residence, leaving behind her personal items, phone, and car. As time passed, the investigation of this case started to resemble a typical crime series, with the exception that it was all unfolding in reality. The community was engulfed in an atmosphere of fear and suspicion, because any of the residents could have been involved in the girl's disappearance. It was only after 12 years that the chilling truth was revealed to the entire world. Tara Grinstead, born in 1974 in Hawkinsville, USA, was an active participant in beauty pageants during her high school years, where she won several accolades. From a young age, she aspired to receive a quality education, saving the money earned from competitions to fund her studies. Following college, Tara obtained a master's degree in education and secured her dream job as a high school history teacher in Ocilla, Georgia. This small town epitomized quintessential America, with a population of around 4,000 individuals who were well acquainted with one another. Life was serene and predictable, with no one suspecting the occurrence of any major crimes in Ocilla. Tara had been teaching at the local school for a number of years, forming strong bonds with both colleagues and students. She was known for her kindness, sociability, and unwavering supportiveness. In October 2005, Tara's assistance was invaluable to her students who were gearing up for a local beauty pageant. Given her past successes in similar competitions, the girls were elated to have her guidance. On the evening of Saturday, October 22nd, aided the students with final preparations before the pageant. Subsequently, she attended a picnic with her high school friends and returned home around 11 p.m., parking her car outside beneath a carport. Following that night, Tara ceased all communication, causing great concern for her mother, who resided in another city. Her daughter was always prompt in answering the phone or returning calls, but this time there was silence on the other end. On Monday, October 24th, her anxiety peaked when Tara failed to show up for work. This was completely out of character for her. She was dedicated to her job and would have definitely informed her superiors if she needed time off. Concerned friends of Tara reached out to Police Chief Billy Hancock, asking him to check on her well-being. At 10 a.m. that morning, he arrived at her residence, assuming her phone was dead and she was either unwell had overslept. Tara's car was parked in its usual spot with unlocked doors, not uncommon in a small town like this where theft was rare. A $100 bill in an envelope on the dashboard caught Billy's attention. It was odd for someone as responsible as Tara to leave money out in the open. Knocking on the door yielded no response, prompting him to search the house. Everything seemed normal until he reached Tara's bedroom. It was in disarray, a stark contrast to her usual neatness. Her belongings were scattered on the floor, including the outfit she was last seen in. Her cell phone was charging on the nightstand, indicating she had left briefly, but was now missing. Outside, a latex glove was discovered, hinting at a potential crime scene. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the state-level equivalent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, was brought in to assist, escalating the case to a higher level of scrutiny. The primary focus of the investigation centered around the kidnapping. Very little evidence was found apart from the glove. Detectives came across only two suspicious items: Tara's broken chain on the bedroom floor and her missing alarm clock. Despite these clues, the mystery of her disappearance remained unsolved. This Monday was a dreadful day for the small town. Tara's residence was sealed off and the school held a meeting. Tara's colleagues and students rallied together to aid in the search, forming a volunteer group. They distributed numerous flyers bearing Tara's image and details of her vanishing, which were promptly displayed all over the city. The volunteers dedicated their day until 1 a.m. to the cause. Bureau of Investigation agents interviewed Tara's neighbors and combed through her neighborhood. Sniffer dogs were brought in to trace the missing person's scent. Investigators clung to the hope that Tara had left on foot and would be easily located by the dogs. The latex glove was handed over to experts who aimed to extract as much information as possible. They managed to obtain a DNA sample, but no matches were found in the FBI database. The only certainty was that the sample belonged to a male. Unfortunately, all efforts proved futile. Tara seemed to have vanished into thin air from her own apartment. Subsequently, investigators delved into Tara's personal history and relationships. It is often the case that someone close to the missing person is involved. After scrutinizing Tara's former partner, Marcus Harper, a retired police officer and military personnel, detectives failed to pinpoint any suspects. Tara had been in a long-term relationship with Marcus, but they parted ways at her behest approximately a year prior to her disappearance. The split occurred due to Tara's desire to start a family, a prospect Marcus was not prepared for. Following the separation, they maintained a cordial relationship, conversing and messaging each other. Detectives later discovered a fascinating detail. Marcus had arrived in Ocilla 3 weeks before Tara vanished, yet he neglected to inform her. Upon hearing of Marcus' visit from mutual acquaintances, the woman grew deeply distressed. She persistently contacted him, seeking an explanation for his silence. Tara's distress escalated into genuine hysteria. Her family grew increasingly concerned, pondering if Tara would act recklessly. Nevertheless, the young woman soon regained composure, and the authorities did not view Marcus as a suspect. The couple had a lengthy history together, but their romance ended, leaving detectives puzzled by the lack of a motive for the crime. A surprising turn of events awaited them. It was revealed that Tara had been threatened by a former student on March 30th, 2005, 7 months before her disappearance. The student had visited her home and displayed aggressive behavior. When Tara refused to allow him entry, he began banging on the door, prompting neighbors to contact law enforcement. It emerged that the young man had harbored feelings for the teacher since high school. According to acquaintances, the former student exhibited emotional instability and peculiar, even alarming behavior. Tara attempted to assist him with his issues for a period, but his mental state deteriorated further. Following the incident where he attempted to break into her home, Tara filed a report against him, fearing for her safety. After Tara vanished, authorities located the young man, who worked in a town approximately 150 kilometers from Oslo. The young man provided detectives with an alibi for the nights surrounding his former teacher's disappearance. His involvement in the case could not be established. Additionally, a business car belonging to a specific police officer was discovered in the woman's residence. Tara had been romantically involved with him for quite some time, but he had already relocated to a different city by the time of her disappearance. The officer even provided an alibi for the night Tara went missing, effectively eliminating any potential suspects. With no solid leads to follow, law enforcement made the decision to launch a search for the young woman 2 weeks after she vanished. The delayed action seemed peculiar, considering it was evident from the start that Tara did not leave willingly. Hundreds of volunteers were summoned to scour the vicinity near the cellar. They combed through forests, ditches, and rivers, yet not a single trace of Tara was found. During the search, news broke that a nearby house had mysteriously burned down. The locals were convinced that the incident was linked to Tara's disappearance. Speculations arose that the culprit was attempting to cover their tracks, or perhaps the community was so shaken that they viewed every occurrence with suspicion. Regardless, the search efforts proved fruitless, leaving the authorities at a loss. In the ensuing years, the case remained unsolved until 2009 when a shocking development brought Tara Grinsted's name back into the public eye. A YouTube channel emerged, featuring a chilling video with a masked man confessing to the disappearances of 16 girls, including Tara. He claimed to have hidden the bodies and promised to reveal their burial locations in subsequent videos. Upon investigation, law enforcement confirmed that all 16 names matched those of missing women. The Federal Bureau of Investigation swiftly identified the video's creator as 27-year-old Andrew Haley. Following his apprehension, Haley insisted that it was all a joke. The authorities failed to link Andrew to any of the 16 missing girls, yet he could not escape a trial for perjury and tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to 2 years of forced labor and 13 years of probation. The fleeting hope of solving this cold case vanished, leaving the police once again without a single lead. In December 2010, Tara Grinstead was officially declared deceased due to lack of evidence. As time passed, the townspeople remembered Tara Grinstead's disappearance vividly, but spoke of it less and less. The shock of Tara's disappearance had a lasting impact on the community, instilling fear and mistrust for years to come. It wasn't until 2016 that something happened to reignite public interest in Tara's case. Atlanta-based journalist Payne Lindsay launched his own podcast dedicated to unsolved cases for the inaugural episode. He focused on the Tara Grinstead's case. Lindsay and his colleague traveled to Oslo, where they met private investigator Maurice Godwin. Together they began working on the case, starting almost from scratch since they had no access to police records. Their only available source of information was the people of the town. Initially, they could only talk to friends and relatives of Tara. Outsiders avoided discussing the missing girl in every way, but Lindsay's enthusiasm managed to revive interest in the case, and soon the people of Oslo were discussing it again. Lindsay and Godwin pursued every possible lead, considering 3 potential suspects: Tara's ex-boyfriends and the student who attempted to break into her house. Along the way, they spoke to anyone who might have had valuable information. They were so dedicated to the case that on several occasions they believed a clue was just within reach. One day, Payne received a call from an anonymous individual who suggested they search for remains on Tara's property. The police did so, and eventually they managed to find bones. Genuine specialists swiftly identified the bones as belonging to an animal. Despite the thrill and a fresh surge of interest in the case, no significant progress was achieved, or rather, the case remained unsolved directly during the production of the podcast. However, it was this amateur investigation that proved pivotal in the long-awaited breakthrough. The climax arrived entirely unexpectedly in early 2017. Brooke Sheridan approached the authorities with a startling narrative that reignited hope among detectives. She disclosed that her former partner, Bo Dukes, had once admitted to her that he assisted his friend in disposing of Tara Grinstead's remains. Upon hearing Brooke's account, law enforcement exercised caution. They instructed her to wear a wire and approach Bo to extract a confession. The plan succeeded. Bo did not refute his involvement, providing the police with probable cause for his arrest. To their astonishment, Bo readily cooperated with the inquiry and divulged all the details. Subsequently, investigators would remark that he was simply weary of bearing the weight on his conscience. Bo admitted that on that fateful night he received a call from his friend and former schoolmate, Ryan Duke. Ryan requested the use of a truck to aid him with a task, mentioning that he had broken into Tara Grinstead's residence to steal money. According to Ryan's version, following a gathering with friends, he embarked on a drive and decided to burglarize a home to acquire cash. His target was Tara's residence. He was under the influence of illicit substances at the time. After gaining entry with a credit card, he intruded into the house and commenced searching for money. Tara caught sight of him, leading to a confrontation between them, from which only Ryan emerged alive. Upon Bo's arrival at Tara's home in a truck, they loaded the woman's body into it and transported her to the woods. The pair then disposed of the body. For several days, this narrative left the inhabitants of Achilla in disbelief. Dukes and Duke were never considered suspects due to their lack of motive and absence of any clues linking them to the woman's disappearance. Despite a full confession, Bo Dukes refused to testify against himself in court. During the trial, he addressed Tara's family, shedding tears and expressing remorse for his actions. Bo, a decorated military veteran, was sentenced to 25 years in prison for his involvement in covering up the crime. The murder trial of Tara Grinstead, carried out by Ryan Duke, was initially scheduled for April 1, 2019. However, the Georgia Supreme Court postponed the trial on March 28, 2019, after Duke's legal team claimed they were unjustly denied funding for expert witnesses. The trial eventually commenced on May 9, 2022. Ryan Duke pleaded not guilty to murder and accused Bo Dukes of the crime. On May 20, 2022, the jury acquitted Ryan Duke of murder but found him guilty of concealing the death. During the trial, Duke asserted that his earlier confessions were fabricated, attributing them to drug influence and fear of the actual perpetrator, his friend with a similar surname, Dukes. He claimed that Bo Dukes woke him up in their shared mobile home in 2005, confessing to Tara Grinstead's murder and displaying her belongings. Despite the absence of her body, forensic analysis matched Grinstead's DNA to bone fragments discovered at the site where Ryan Duke alleged he and Bo Dukes incinerated her remains. On May 23, 2022, Ryan Duke was sentenced to the maximum penalty of 10 years in prison concealing the body by the Irwin County Superior Court. At the time of sentencing, Ryan Duke had already served approximately half of his sentence while awaiting trial. Prosecutors vehemently argued that Duke's admission contained intricate details known only to the perpetrator, such as Duke disclosing to authorities that he phoned Grinstead's residence from a payphone after absconding from home to check if she would pick up. Upon receiving no response, he retraced his steps only to discover her lifeless body. Furthermore, investigators uncovered Duke's genetic material on a latex glove recovered from Grinstead's premises. Nevertheless, his testimony sowed enough skepticism in the jury's minds, resulting in his acquittal on all charges, save for concealing her demise. Bo Dukes was summoned to provide testimony, but opted to invoke his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. When the truth surrounding this high-profile case finally surfaced, Tara Grinstead's loved ones and friends breathed a collective sigh of relief as the weight of uncertainty was lifted off their shoulders. Her mother tearfully admitted that throughout the years she had harbored a secret hope for a miracle, the return of her daughter, safe and sound. Martha Jean Lambert was born March 26, 1973 to Howard and Margaret Lambert. At the age of 12, she was a 7th grader at Ketterlingus Junior High School and living on Carrie Lynn Road in St. Augustine, Florida. She was described as a shy, friendly, happy, and trusting girl that just wanted to be liked. Her family was described as dysfunctional and troubled and also described as odd by those who knew them. Neighbors said her father was an alcoholic and there was a lot of loud fighting at their home. They also described Martha as always dirty and never had clean clothes to wear. The Lambert children had been in foster care at least once before due to alleged child abuse, and her two older brothers, 14-year-old David and oldest brother Raymond, had previously run away. A neighbor said it wasn't unusual to hear Howard Lambert yelling inside the trailer, adding there was lots of anger in that family. On November 27, 1985, Martha was looking forward to spending Thanksgiving the next day at her grandmother's house. Sadly, she would never make it. She disappeared the night before Thanksgiving, and there have been several different versions given by her family as to what actually occurred. Reports say that she went to a friend's home after school that day, returning home about 7:30 p.m. and had dinner with her brother David. Initially, David said that she told him she was going out, but refused to tell him where she was going. He said the last time that he saw her, she was walking down the street towards Little Champ, a store on State Road 207. He then said the last time he saw her, she was getting into a black car. Her mother said that Martha was with her at a neighbor's home, and she said she was going to run home and would be back in 5 minutes. When she didn't return, she went looking for her upon arriving home. Her youngest son David was walking out of the trailer laughing, though he would not tell her why he was laughing. Margaret has since stated that this has always bothered her. Martha was reported missing at 3 a.m. on November 28th when no one could find her. Authorities started to search for Martha immediately following her disappearance in areas along State Road 207 and near Carey Lynn Road, and they questioned everyone in the area. Some neighbors stated that they had seen Martha walking west on Caryland Road later that night. Others also reported that they had seen a suspicious green van being driven in the area. It was the only vehicle that was not native to the area. Her mother believed that Martha was abducted outside of their mobile home that evening while wearing her two-piece bathing suit or a summer dress by the strange green van that was seen in the area. It was apparently spotted soon after Martha left. But nothing was found and the case started to turn cold. However, authorities long suspected her 14-year-old brother David Allen Lambert knew more about his sister's disappearance than he had disclosed. 15 years later, after being arrested in 2000 for passing a bad check, he told police he was responsible for his sister's death and had buried her at a coke-wine mine on Holmes Boulevard, known locally as the Pits. However, investigators didn't recover a body and he wasn't charged at the time because investigators couldn't find Martha's body or any other evidence to support his statement. David's confession wasn't publicized until 2009, and it was then that his mother told the media she didn't believe it. She stated David often makes up stories to get attention, and she thinks others were responsible for Martha's disappearance. Shortly after Margaret voiced her opinion to the press, David retracted his previous statements. In media interviews, he stated the police wanted to close Martha's case and he only told them what they wanted to hear. He said he is mentally incompetent, has long-standing emotional problems, and has no idea what actually happened to Martha. In 2009, he again confessed to killing Martha. After a 20-hour interview and interrogation, he and the detective sat his mother down and had to convince her that he was telling the truth. He stated that on November 27, 1985, he and Martha left home because their parents got into a fight over a burned turkey. They went to a Little Champ's convenience store and she bought $4 in candy with a $20 bill David had. They then went to the old abandoned Florida Memorial College near their home. Apparently, they got into an argument because she wouldn't give him the change from the $20. He then stated that she hit him and he then pushed her so hard that she fell onto the ground and her head landed on a rusted and jagged piece of metal. He claimed he called out for help, hoping someone would come and help her and that no one apparently heard him. David was scared of what his parents would do to him if they discovered what he had done to Martha. So by using the broken piece of a road sign, he dug a 3-foot makeshift grave and placed her there. He said he then went home and got cleaned up. He said he was a scared 14-year-old. Investigators were unable to find Martha's body on the land where Florida Memorial College once was. 2 years prior to David's second confession, the area was bulldozed due to criminal activity and completely rebuilt, decreasing the odds even more of ever finding her. Cadaver dogs taken to the site where David said his sister was buried also showed a change in behavior, although an excavation of the area turned up nothing of interest. Police believed his story, but no charges were filed against him. Because he was a minor at the time of the incident and the statute of limitations for manslaughter had expired and they considered the case closed. During the recorded conversation of David and the detective sitting his mother down to let him confess the details to her, some people say that there are a few red flags, as if it is a false or coerced confession. The interrogation with David reportedly lasted 20 hours, and before his mother was sat down to be told the story, detectives took David out of the room for a period of time and spoke to him. Also, it is hard to believe that he dug a 3-foot hole with a piece of a broken sign. At the time of her disappearance in 1985, her father was 74 years old and her mother was 33. Her disappearance tore the family apart as the fighting increased between her parents and her father's drinking got worse. Since she has been missing, her father has died. Her mother has moved to Illinois and remarried and is now Margaret Pahan. Her oldest brother Raymond now goes by the name Cynthia Jean Lambert. It is unclear where he was when Martha went missing, but one report says he may have been at church. Martha's body has not been located, and as of today, this case remains unsolved.